want to be under the bright lights. I want to be on the Broadway stage.
Tiger Rag Radio is on now.
Now on the Max Home Hotline, Blake Lovell for the first time this year. He's the host of the Southeastern 16 podcast, as we're going to talk some SEC hoops. And Blake, we've had you on the show for several years now, and I remember there would be years and we would talk to you and say, well, Kentucky's good, and this team's good, and then this team's kind of good, and then the rest is blah. That's not the case this year. I mean, 1 through 16, it's very impressive. We knew it was going to be a strong year for SEC hoops, but what has made this league even that much more stronger? And obviously, it has dominated the non-conference portion of the schedule.
Yeah, I mean, it's an unprecedented start for any conference. I mean, I think you can certainly make the argument the SEC in the non-conference, assuming Tennessee and Kentucky don't lose tonight, will have had the strongest non-conference of any conference ever. And I don't think that's really exaggerating. Like, the numbers all say the same thing. And so, yeah, I mean, it's just pretty remarkable what the league's been able to accomplish. I think the first time ever you have a 16-team league that is going to have every single team, all 16, are going to have 10 or more wins entering conference play. Never been done before either. So, yeah, I mean, it's just every team has sort of put together rosters that have had success, and I think what the SEC's done this year is you just haven't seen a lot of those, losing bye games. Like, we see that every year. You kind of haven't seen that much at all this year, and you also have teams that are winning big games, and you put all that together, and it's been a successful formula so far.
So, Blake, this is Todd. Is this just an aberration of sorts, or is this going to be the case moving every year? And why is it that way? What has happened? The way they operate programs in the SEC has changed. What's going on?
I think it's the way of the future. I mean, will they be as strong, every year? Maybe not, because I do think this is kind of just a historic type season so far. But, I think what's going to happen is the more NIL and all that becomes a factor, you're going to have power conferences like the SEC sometimes that just are able to do this. And, I think if you're looking at it from a mid-major, low-major standpoint, I mean, those guys could be at a, kind of smaller advantage or disadvantage, I guess you could say, that they've ever been, just based on that fact. And that's why you're seeing, how many games have we seen this year? We're used to SEC teams winning some of these, bye games against teams that are not as good as they are. But how many times we see teams this year win by 50 or more points? Right. I mean, there's a lot more this season than there has been before. And so I just think you're seeing that gap widen a little bit. And, I think it's just coaches are able to build rosters now with NIL, and that's something that has its issues too, but you have rosters that can come together pretty well. And I mean, I think the coaching roster is, as good as it's ever been in the SEC. So I think you just, again, combine all those things together, and that's why it's working so well right now.
Well, with the SEC actually starting play this weekend, and we're staring the college football playoffs in the face right now, it seems kind of odd, but you do have Auburn ranked number 1 in the net, Tennessee number 2. You have Florida number 4, you have Alabama number 8, and you have the rest of the 16 teams, except for South Carolina, ranked in the top 50, or 55, which means they would be going seriously being considered for the tournament right now. How do you see that changing, asking you to look into a crystal ball as the year evolves?
Yeah, and that's why, I feel like we get towards the end of the year and people like to say, well, what you did in November doesn't really matter. Well, that's simply not true. And I think that's where this is going to be interesting, because we've not seen a conference do this before, where everyone has really done a lot of their work early on, to where when you get to those games in February, in early March, what you did in November is actually going to be the biggest asset for the SEC, because you're looking at a scenario where, right now, you mentioned all those numbers. I mean, you're simply playing most of your SEC schedule is going to be quad 1 games. Mm-hmm. And that's what the committee cares about. They tell us that every single season. Not just if you win games, but how many of those games do you play? Well, the SEC teams are going to be playing more of those games than maybe we've seen a conference do, maybe outside the Big Ten, ACC many years ago, but we weren't talking quad 1 net rankings, all that then. But we've not seen anything like this before. And so I think what's going to happen is you're going to have, and I know see people say the SEC is going to eat itself. And
Right.
there's some truth to that because somebody has to win and somebody has to lose. But the thing is, you got to fill the tournament. We can say the SEC is going to eat itself and there should only be 8 teams in because 8 and 10 teams in this league shouldn't get in the tournament, or a 7-11 team shouldn't get in the tournament. Well, that's not how the committee looks at it. They got to fill 68 spots. And so to do that, I think you're going to have multiple SEC teams, no matter what the combination of wins and losses is, that are going to get in at 8 and 10. They're going to have a losing record in this conference this year, and they're still going to get in the tournament. I think there's a great chance, depending on the combination of wins and losses, a 7-11 team is going to get in. It's been done before by West Virginia, and I think this is the strongest league ever to this point, numbers-wise. So why wouldn't a team at 7-11 get in if it's the right combination of wins and losses? So I think inevitably there are going to be a couple teams that drop off. It's going to happen. Some teams are not going to perform like they have to this point. It's just a matter of how strong the league is. But overall, I don't think it's unrealistic to say that the SEC can get 11 or 12 teams in the tournament still, even fast forward 2 months from now, just because I think there's going to be enough big win opportunities to go around. And there's going to be one other thing, and it may be the most important thing. You're going to be avoiding a lot of bad losses, which has not always been the case.
Mm-hmm.
Hi, I'm Mike Munderland, and we're here to smash the capital city's trash.
Smash My Trash is a revolutionary compactor for large dumpsters, sometimes reducing the volume of waste by up to 70%. This means fewer hauls per month and big savings for your business. Fewer hauls and compacted waste will also result in a positive impact on our community and our environment by taking up less space in our local landfill sites. Schedule your company's free demo today. Call 225-497-0101.
So when you look at it right now, if you were to predict the SEC for the season, just within the conference, not thinking about the NCAA tournament per se, do you agree right now that Auburn and Tennessee are the cream of the crop?
I think Auburn is on a different level than everybody else right now. And I know the AP poll would differ and all that kind of stuff. But again, Auburn statistically may be the best team we've seen to this point. And I'm not just saying that within the concept of the SEC. They're one of the best statistical teams in college basketball in this era where we've started using more, ratings and metrics and all that. So go back, 25 years or more.
Wow.
All the numbers check out. They're the best offensive team in the Ken Pom era to this point in the season ever. They have the best efficiency rating of any team ever in the Ken Pom era to this point. So that goes back 28 years or so. So I think Auburn is very clearly the best team. They're doing all this with a top 10 strength of schedule. They won 6 quad one games. The next team, I guess, won 3 or 4 maybe.
Right.
Their only loss is to a road game at Duke by 6 points. It was number 3 in the net. And so it's that's it. Everything else, they've beaten 2 top 5 teams. They've blown out Ohio State. They've blown out Purdue. They've kind of blown out Memphis and North Carolina, won Maui, all those things. So I think Auburn, if there is one team, in my opinion, that can be that outlier that pulls away from everybody else, I think it's Auburn. But then I think Tennessee's interesting. I think Florida's very interesting. I don't think they're getting enough credit. But I still think you also have to throw in Alabama, Texas A&M, Mississippi State, Kentucky, those teams like that, who I think are still, and not even mention a 13-0 Oklahoma team. Right. But that kind of shows you how the top part of this league could shake out. I don't know that there is a lot that separates even a Tennessee who's unbeaten right now from, let's say, a Mississippi State who's 12-1. I think we're going to see that gap's a little smaller than people think, but I do feel like Auburn is the team that's really proven itself to this point, unlike anybody else, just based on what they've done.
What's your impression of LSU and Matt McMahon at this point in the season?
Yeah, I mean, look, they're better than I thought they'd be. I think just, we came into the season expecting LSU to be a clear bottom 3 team maybe in the SEC, and it wasn't because necessarily we were that down on LSU. It was just, again, the expectations for the strength of the conference. By adding Texas and Oklahoma, we thought had a chance to be decent teams at the very least. And so now I think it's going to be interesting to see where they're at, right? Because LSU is one of those teams that if you're looking at their profile to this point, they don't have that just overwhelmingly great win. And I think that's the one thing they're lacking that a lot of other teams do have in the SEC, even in Missouri, who's played a poor non-conference schedule. they've got that Kansas win. So it's like that stands out to me because I've seen them do that against the Kansas. LSU, I've seen them lose a couple games to teams that are pretty good in Pitt and SMU. I've seen them beat, a UCF in triple overtime, which, is going to look better, I think, as the season progresses. Florida State in a land in the ACC where it's just a mess right now in ACC basketball. I don't think Florida State's a bad team, but I don't think they're a great team either. And so I think that's what's going to be interesting with LSU. And the thing is, I think they have a great start to conference play, home against Vanderbilt, at Missouri, at Ole Miss. I think all three of those teams have something to prove, and so does LSU. So, like, how they navigate this first week or so of action, I think is going to be very important because roster-wise, I probably mentioned this to you guys. I don't know if we talked earlier this year, but Jordan Sears is someone I was very high on. Victorious Miller has come out and played a big role on this team. Obviously, someone like a Corey Chest has played a bigger role. Cam Carter doing what he's done. I think what's going to be interesting, not having Jalen Reed, I feel like is going to be the one thing that if we look back later in the season and we're saying, what was that missing part? It may be that, right? And so I'm curious to see how it plays out for LSU, but I think to this point, I think they've exceeded expectations at least through 13 games.
Blake, thanks a lot for your time, man. We really appreciate it. Happy New Year, and I'm excited to see how this all goes down. Thanks again for your time, and we'll certainly be talking to you in January, February, and March.
Sounds great, guys. Thanks as always.
It's time to start betting on yourself. Louisiana 988 can help if you're dealing with tough emotions caused by gambling habits. You can share as much or as little as you want, and it's completely confidential. It's free, available 24/7, and most people who reach out report feeling better right in the moment. Call or text 988 anytime.
Season's Readings. Yes, readings from your friends with the East Baton Rouge Parish Library. Ring in the holidays with movies shown from the plaza of the library on Goodwood. Crafts galore. Please come and browse. And what would the holidays be without music? Your East Baton Rouge Parish Library will feature several concerts with unique artists. To get the full calendar of events, go to ebrpl.com. The East Baton Rouge Parish Library.